Welcome, bienvenidos a Elecciones 2018. I'm Elizabeth Ortega-Lohmeyer, your host and producer. Tonight we will have a chance to hear and meet Alan Bowser, a candidate for Montgomery County Clerk of the Court. Alan is a graduate from Princeton, Johns Hopkins, and Georgetown, and he is Silver Spring. And with us is Santiago Tavara, writer, editor, and reporter. Let's start with Alan. Alan, tell me why Latinos should vote for you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to talk to voters across Montgomery County and people around the world. I've spent most of my public career encouraging engagement from communities of color, and have spent a special effort working with Latino residents in Montgomery County. I started my civic engagement in Montgomery County working for the county executive and the Silver Spring Citizens Advisory Board. I chaired their neighborhood committee for 6 years, and I made it an important effort to try to bring Latino people to the table. There's a very diverse population in Silver Spring, and I found that our conversations were enhanced by having Latinos, African Americans, Continental Americans, Caucasians, people from all over the world. We had a very high level of conversation, and we were able to concentrate on issues of interest to the broad community.
But do you have relationships with Latino organizations in Up County, for example?
Up County?
Yeah, for example.
I've got lots of relationships with organizations all over. I'm a member of many boards of directors, and president and vice president and treasurers and secretaries of many. One of the things that is particularly of interest to me is environmental issues. I'm the secretary of a countywide group called Conservation Montgomery, and I've made it one of my priorities to bring Latinos into the environmental movement. So we've worked with CASA, we've worked with Identity. We were involved in the Save 10 Mile Creek effort, trying to persuade everybody that clean air and clean water was important to everybody in the community. We've been very successful in Conservation Montgomery. We've partnered with the Audubon Naturalist Society. They've recently had a conference that focused on Latinos. We started a web page. One of our pages is in Spanish. We've reached out to Friends of Sligo Creek, and at every opportunity I try to bring Spanish-speaking people into our work. Particularly interested in trying to get them to help us with our creek cleanups, because we have a lot of creeks down county, and we would like to have more help, and so we do lots of.
So you like
outreach.
Latinos?
Love Latinos, right? Love Latinos.
And do you like our food? I think I saw you dancing salsa in Silver Spring.
So I'm also on the board of a nonprofit called the After School Dance Fund, and what we do is we encourage Latin dance classes in all of Montgomery County's high schools. Every November, the Monday before Thanksgiving, we have a MCPS Latin dance competition where many people come to see their sons and daughters dance salsa, merengue, bachata, and salsa.
For people who are not familiar with this position, can you describe what are the responsibilities of clerk of the circuit court?
I'd be glad to. Most people don't know what the clerk of the circuit court is, and it's one of the oldest positions in the state of Maryland and around the country. And typically, the clerk is responsible for custody and protection of official documents. So when you file a document in the courthouse, it's the responsibility of the clerk to protect them and to make sure that they go into the right place. This election is interesting because it's not a county election, it's a state election. So in the 23 counties of Maryland and the city of Baltimore, we elect 4 state officers: the state's attorney, the clerk of the court, the register of wills, and the sheriff. They're not county offices, they're state offices, and all controlled by missives and instructions that come from Annapolis. So the clerk of the court is an important part of the judiciary, and it's one of the offices that people call the courthouse team. Those four offices that I described: sheriff, clerk, state's attorney, and register of wills. That's the group that provides the leadership for the judiciary, along with the judges and the administrative judge.
And that's Superior Court or District Court or both?
It's the circuit court.
The Circuit Court.
Circuit court, and it's an important job that nobody knows much about.
And that's my next question. Why do you think people don't know? What's going on?
I think that people's political attention is sort of focused on the higher levels, on governor and senator and congressperson, county executive, maybe county council. And for decades, nobody has really paid attention to the courthouse offices that we elect countywide every 4 years. And maybe it's so they can protect their positions of power. If people don't know about them, then a small group of people can re-elect people into these particular offices, which are very influential.
If you're elected, you will be the first African American in this position. Can you tell me why there hasn't been any minorities in this position before?
Well, part of it, I think, has to do with the reason I just mentioned, which is that nobody knows about these offices. Nobody knows that they're elected. My election would be deeply symbolic because Montgomery County is now majority minority, with huge percentage of African Americans and Latinos, and the courthouse leadership doesn't reflect the change in demography that we see.
Yeah.
So for people who think that there should be more diversity, more representation, that there should be more different voices at the table, that there should be different complexions of people in the courthouse, this election is very symbolic. In fact, as I travel around the county, really doing the first county-wide campaign for clerk, people mention that diversity is very important to them, and new voices need to be heard.
You're challenging the incumbent, and you say she's not representing the community interests. Can you mention some specifics, like why?
No, absolutely, and this part of my campaign. There should be more diversity throughout our judiciary. There should be more African American and Latino judges. There should be more Latino and African American police officers and officers in the sheriff's department. There should be more
personnel.
There should be more diversity throughout the county government. And I've worked as a chief of staff in the Maryland General Assembly and the Montgomery County Council. I know firsthand that there's a lot of disparities between people of color in management throughout government. The gold standard for clerk of the court was actually Molly Rule, and that was several clerks again, and people point to her as a high level of service in the courthouse. Since then, there's been two clerks, and it seems like the service has gone down. I know for a fact that some of the employees in the office are not happy. They are not pleased with the working environment that they have. And it's pretty widespread knowledge that we really could use a real change in leadership. Most of the people at the highest level of the clerk's office have been there for decades, and they haven't really been exposed to new ideas, new ways of thinking, innovation. And it's not only Montgomery County. I was having a conversation from somebody with Anne Arundel County today, and that's throughout the state, that the top leadership throughout the courthouse, throughout the county, is really 20th century in the 21st century, and so we need a change.
By the way, Mohammed Siddiqui is watching, Darren Mark Popkin and Barbara Mikkel-John are watching.
That's good.
You want to expand the outreach to the immigrant population. How do you want to do that?
So one of the things that I think could be done, you have to start from the assumption that you want to maintain a high level of service in the courthouse. But I've been arguing that you can do more. You can go beyond the statutory requirements of of the office of the clerk. And there are communities of color throughout Montgomery County that don't know about the judiciary. But we have lots of contact with the judiciary. There are lots of African Americans, Continental Americans, Asians, Latinos who going into the courthouse system and don't really know what the processes and procedures are. I mean, people, they'll go in if they get a traffic ticket or they have a divorce or there's some domestic violence issues that they're dealing with. But I'd like the court to be more engaged with the community, to educate them that the courts can be of service to them, that if they want to redress their disputes in a way which is fair and reasonable, they can have access to the courts. I think we could do a lot more in reaching out to the community. That's been one of the themes of my professional life, my public life, is actually engaging the community. I mentioned engaging them on environmental issues, we engage them on public safety issues, we engage them on arts and humanities issues, we engage them with dance. Reaching out to the community is very, very important, and this courthouse team is not doing a good job, the best possible job that they could do reaching out to the community.
And what do you think is the most important thing that you will change when you are elected?
Well, besides bringing a new voice to the courthouse team, I think it'd be deeply symbolic for people who throughout the county to know that we've made a change when there hasn't been change in decades. I think that the clerk of the court and the sheriff and the state's attorney and the register of wills can be advocates for things that they think are important. So I've talked about, besides doing the job right and making sure that the courthouse is highly efficient, that you can advocate for things that you think are important, because you're elected countywide by tens of thousands of people. You can be a spokesperson and have lots of credibility. So I've talked about how the clerk or the state's attorney or the sheriff or the register of wills can talk about things like criminal justice reform. You can talk about justice reinvestment, talk about raising juror pay, which hasn't been raised in decades. Talk about cameras in the courtroom. I know there's a difference of opinion about that, but some people are interested, and there are other states. You've seen some trials on television, and people are deeply interested. I think it brings the courts closer to the community. So advocate for things like that, getting rid of cash bail, which is a problem for poor people. So there's lots of things that you could speak about in this position, and so I'm interested in doing that.
So for years, and I can say for 1980, I heard over and over and over that this area is white. It's very white. That's what people say. When it's about a landlord and tenant issue, they are on the side of the landlords. When it's a criminal case, good luck with the public defender's office. So I hope that you can make any change possible to have more participation, more equal participation. How do you feel about your candidacy right now?
I did very well in 2014. This is my second run for this office, and as a first-time candidate, I got about 25,000 votes all across the county. And as I mentioned earlier, I've got good support down county, and I'm working harder to get support up county. There are vibrant communities in Damascus and Clarksburg and Germantown and Gaithersburg and Poolesville and Darnestown and Laytonsville, and I'd like to spend more time campaigning there. I've got lots of political support. I'm very proud of my political support, in addition to the county executive who supports me, Ike Leggett, Sid Kramer, earlier county executive, Jamie Raskin, John Delaney, Eleanor Holmes Norton. I saw her at an event a couple weeks ago. She said, "I can't vote for you, but I support you." 6 members of the county council, mayors and delegates and council members in Tacoma Park and Chevy Chase and really, literally hundreds of people who are wishing me well. And if they all lift me up, I'll be successful this time. It's really a grassroots campaign. You can go to my website at www.alanbowser.net and see a list of the people who support my campaign, and also a list of the issues some of the issues that I've offered up as being very important.
So you're happy with the endorsement from Mr. Leggett?
I'm very happy. Well, the county executive endorsed me 4 years ago, as did Congressman Jamie Raskin when he was a state senator. So there's lots of support. This time I'm going to ask him to do a little bit more, because there was a narrow margin between me and the current clerk.
But many people are not happy with endorsements of Mr. Leggett, especially for county council at large. Because he selected 4 men, 2 may be good or with experience, but 2 others they don't have the experience. They should not be endorsed by the county executive. And selecting 4 men, it's an insult to all the women that are running for office.
So I know about that controversy very, very well. I was with the county executive just the end of last week, and we talked about it, and he was proud of the fact that he was endorsing an Asian American, Latino, an African American, and of course an incumbent, the current
But that's not a
council
reason
president.
to endorse people.
No, but he's also done, I think, an extraordinary job in sort of appointing women throughout his administration as head of department on his personal staff. He's endorsed women.
I'm sorry, Alan, but I don't buy that.
Your opponent is building a campaign on Maryland electronic court filing. What do you think about that proposal?
Well, no, we all will have electronic filing. It's just a question of when. They had some startup issues in Anne Arundel County, which was the first county which piloted the program. They had some problems, and they had to revisit that. And so we need to look carefully at Anne Arundel's experience to see what will happen in Montgomery. Everybody will have it after a while. I mean, it's a 21st century technology, but there's going to be a lot of growing pains as we adopt a paperless system. And right now the system is very much based on paper. So I'm as excited and as interested as she is in implementing electronic filing, e-filing in Montgomery County. It's one of the reasons why I'm running. I'd like to be part of that conversation and that process.
And you are proposing also legal aid funding for low-income families, because you are saying that people get charged with complicated offenses. Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned before, the clerk has to do his or her job well, to the best of their ability. It's got to be flawless. You have to have a perfect organization, but you can advocate for things outside of the statutory requirements. One of them, like juror pay, one of the cameras in the courtroom, the community engagement piece. But why not advocate for higher salaries for courtroom staff? I think that's not the job of the clerk, but you can talk to people in the legislature and advocate for that. In the same way, you can advocate for substantially more money for legal aid, because there's a high level of poverty. There's a lot of people who are underserved, and this would be an opportunity to provide more resources to help them do their work.
We have 1 more minute, and I would like to know, what would you tell your voters at the election time?
I'm going to tell them that I want to be their next clerk of the court, and that I want to bring new transparency, accountability, diversity, and representation to the Montgomery County Courthouse. I'd ask them to join with me to help build a 21st century courthouse, and I think that people will want to be engaged in that process. The county has changed, the courthouse is not.
Could you briefly comment on your international experience? You work at the World Bank.
My international experience.
You worked at the World Bank.
So I have really broad international experience. went to school at Princeton and Johns Hopkins studying international relations, worked on a PhD in Southern Africa and traveled to South Africa, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia. Worked at the World Bank for 10 years and left the World Bank to go work for President Clinton at the Treasury. I worked in Treasury at the beginning of my career. But then I went to Commerce after the World Bank and had an opportunity to travel around the world representing the United States, going to India and Russia and China, going to Mexico, going to the European community. And it was a great honor and privilege for me to, when they recognized me, to say that I was there on behalf of President Clinton and the people of the United States. It's that kind of service that I'd like to bring to the office of the clerk in Montgomery County.
Well, thank you very much to both of you, and thank you to our friends in Facebook for joining us tonight at Elections 2018. And I wish you the best, Alan.
Thank you.
And if I vote for you, I'll vote for your qualifications and not because you're African American.
Thank you so much.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.